Good morning, guys. Happy Wednesday. It's John with Empire Weather. Today is Wednesday, June 5th, and we're here with your latest North American agriculture update. A lot to talk about today. The buzz is increasing. We're starting to get towards that crescendo of the season as we move towards a really important and critical time. And I want to start by looking at where we've been for the last 30 days, which is up here on the screen. But first, let's just think about this season and back up and look at a bird's eye view of what the forecast has been, what the expectations have been, and where we stand right now. So I'm sure everyone remembers we came into this season back in February and March forecasting a very active start, lots of moisture as we were transitioning from the El Nino to the La Nina. So that's not a surprise. Here's our article from February 3rd talking about moisture being encouraged across the central United States. So this is not a surprise at all. This is part of the forecast. And the other thing that we talked about as we went deeper into the season was going to be the likelihood that the risk level would increase for dryness and warmth the deeper that we went into this season. And so it's been a little bit of a quiet start from our end, mainly because all of this is very well anticipated. But now we're starting to approach the critical time of year where we're going to see a flip in the risks for this year. And we're going to transition from, are we going to get planting done? It's a little bit too wet, to where is this ridge going to set up and are we going to get hot and dry? And that's a big change, both from an operational perspective and from a market sentiment perspective as well. So here's where we've been for the last several days. This is 30 days. Obviously, it's been very active for a lot of regions, especially the northern plains. Down here into parts of the upper Midwest. A little belt of drier conditions from northern Missouri into parts of Illinois and Indiana. But broadly, it's been quite wet across the agriculture belt. And that has really been beneficial moisture for a lot of folks. It got a little wet and a little dicey at times, but most areas kind of received this. In fact, I got some reports this morning. Some areas say they could use a little more moisture. And so this has been pretty good. And I think overall, where we stand today, Wednesday, June 5th, we're in a pretty good place. Here's the forecast for the next several days. And the pattern is going to start to change. It might not look all that different immediately, but it's going to get there. We have a couple shower and storm chances for the next day or so, but this trough here in the east is going to encourage a northwesterly flow, right? This is the flow down through the agriculture belt as we move not only through this weekend, but also into early next week. And what this northwest flow does is it creates cooler and drier conditions. So most models agree that temperatures will decrease to a couple degrees below normal. We'll take the heat and humidity out of the forecast through the middle part of next week, and we'll also take the precipitation out as well. We go from this very wet pattern we've been in to this drier pattern as we move into the middle part of June. Some precipitation risks across the southern plains, wheat areas here of the Texas Panhandle, Oklahoma, Kansas, Colorado. We'll take it, right? We'll get some moisture down here. They need it. Up here in the Ag Belt, we'll take a little bit of a break over the next several days. This takes us to about the 15th of June. And again, that's all being driven by this northwesterly flow. There's no moisture in a northwesterly flow, right? Our moisture sources are down here in the Pacific, the Gulf, and the Atlantic. This is all dry northwesterly flow coming down. So it's going to be a quiet couple of days taking us into the middle part of next week. And that moisture that we've really built up over the last several weeks will come to roost here during that time and will allow us to have this period of dryness without any huge major concerns. But as we move into late June, let's start talking about what's going to happen and why we feel the risk is going to very steadily increase as we go into late June and then July, but also we're not immediately very concerned. So one of the things that we've talked about all year has been the persistent jet stream, right? If we look at the pattern, even going back to yesterday as an example, here's where our troughing has been across the northwest, and that has allowed Gulf of Mexico and Pacific moisture to come into the central U.S. Our trough has been here. We have not had big established ridging because of how active the jet stream has been. That is a lot of the reason that has happened is thanks to the MJO. And you can't see it on this chart, but the MJO has been consistently sliding from left to right like this across the Pacific. So if we look at this chart, we're just looking at convection and the movement of the MJO as a result. So the greens and blues are showing you thunderstorm activity, and the reds and yellows are showing you subsidence, sinking air, no thunderstorms. So very active it has been since May. We've had MJO just sliding left to right like this across the Pacific, left to right. So here are your dates on the left side, and here's your the area that it's occurring on the bottom. So when you see this movement here, that's the MJO convection sliding this way over time. So we've had wave after wave after wave of the MJO. the jet stream has been super active. What we start to see in mid-June is that we have a lot more oranges and reds. There's a little bit of blue and green ingested into the pattern here at times, but a lot of subsidence and sinking air. This is like turning off the engine to the momentum in the pattern, to the Pacific jet stream across parts of the country. Everything backs up. And so what this does is it takes this really active pattern we've been in and it completely flips it. So what the models are showing is this really active jet we've had pointed at the country is going to start to shift. And our ridge that's been down here over Mexico is going to get a chance to flex its muscles as we move into late June. Now, where this jet stream sets up is going to be hugely important. There's just enough momentum left in this pattern here, you see through mid and late June, this sliding left to right, that the jet stream will still be there. And so what this tells me is that our ridging is likely going to set up here across the southern plains at some period of time as we move into later June, but the jet is going to remain active across the northern plains. And this is a nice pattern to get storm clusters along the edge of these ridges. We talk a lot about the ridge and the 588 line, right? Look at through late June. That 588 line is still down here across the central plains on the European. And if we go over to the GFS, the 588 line is still right down here across the central plains. So this is not a pattern that will preclude storm activity. And I think that's important to note. The ridge is coming, but initially it should be fairly active. And so let's see what the European model says. And lo and behold, here's your active pattern, right? We are in a period of drier weather over the next several days, but as soon as that ridge builds, the storm clusters come back and you start to see them appearing here with rounds of showers and storms likely across the northern plains and a large majority of the Corn Belt through the latter part of June. So that takes us to about June 20th to June 25th. We have a ridge building, we know that, but by and large, it's still far enough south where we still have storm clusters, we still have precipitation, and we still have storm activity. So it's getting warmer, the risk level is rising slightly, but we have enough precipitation here through late June to keep things cranking. Where the concern starts to build is the period after that. The La Nina is coming in strong. We see it developing here quickly over the last several weeks and months, now coming into the central Pacific. We still have our warm blob here across the North Pacific Ocean, and that the combination of these two things, as well as the big, massively warm sea surface temperatures in the Atlantic and Gulf, are going to help to encourage this ridging as we move forward. So the weeklies say that ridge starts down here in the southern plains, but watch it move northward over time as we move into late June and then early July. The concern with that is that as it moves northward, it could take that active precipitation pattern with it. So initially we have a pattern where the dryness is relegated down here into the southern plains, and we still have an active pattern across the Corn Belt. But look at as we get into very late June and then early July, that dryness starts to shift up here into key areas like Nebraska, Iowa, Missouri, parts of Illinois. It's the period, and we're using this as an arbitrary date, but it's the period from the 25th of June forward into July that I think we need to be careful with here, because if this ridge does push northward, and it will be encouraged to do so by this SST configuration, that could push the dry risk north too, and then start getting us into a conversation where a lot of the central U.S. and the belt is dealing with drier conditions and the warmer conditions that the model suggests will come along with this ridge. And as we know, warmth or heat and dryness is when we start to get into the conversation where we're having some issues with the crop. So again, to go back to where we stand here, initially the idea as we move into late June from about the 15th to the 25th is we're good here. It's going to warm up for sure. The southern plains will dry out, Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, but the core of the Corn Belt here is likely to remain quite active thanks to the position of the ridge. You see very clearly that we have this active precipitation pattern. These are ridge riding storms coming over the top of the ridge through late June. It is the late, very late, 25th of June and beyond time frame. So the week of the 25th into July. That's when we start to see the models pushing that dryness north. And if that were to occur along with the warmth and heat, we'd start looking at some adverse conditions for this crop as we get into a key time of year. So we're going to have to monitor this really closely as we go through the next couple of days and weeks. We're going to break it down week by week for you. I think that's the best way to do this is let's compartmentalize this, right? Let's look at each week at a time. And so right now, we're okay. We have a break coming up next week with cooler temperatures. Then we get into the week of the 24th. And that's when things start to, get a little bit dicey. But before then, we have a very active pattern. We'll try to get as much moisture as we can. Again, it's a little up and down, right? Until then, it dries out next week. The active pattern comes back. We have ridge riding storms until about the 25th. And then from the 25th onward, the models say this dryness could start to push north into the key regions. And we need to watch that really, really closely. So we'll be with you this whole way. Daily videos coming your way here as we get into a peak time of year. As always, if you guys have questions, please do not hesitate. Send us an email. Give us a shout. We're happy to help 24/7. Have a great Wednesday, guys. We'll talk to you tomorrow morning.